Have you ever wondered how safe your money really is in your bank account? Let's delve into a tale that might make you question that safety. It's the story of Brandon Bible, an ordinary man who discovered a staggering $30,000 had vanished from his account at Arizona Bank and Trust. Imagine waking up one morning, checking your account balance, and finding it $30,000 lighter. That's the reality Brandon faced. But the shock of the missing money was just the beginning. When Brandon approached the bank about the discrepancy, he was met with a wall of denial and evasion. One name kept surfacing in Brandon's quest for answers: Ken Gable, the vice president of Arizona Bank and Trust. It was Gable, Brandon alleges, who was at the helm of this shocking theft. But the story doesn't end there. As Brandon dug deeper, he began to uncover a web of deceit more intricate than he could have ever imagined. What started as a simple query about missing funds soon spiraled into a maze of falsified documents and doctored bank statements. Brandon found himself staring at a mountain of evidence that seemed to point to one conclusion: the bank, and specifically Ken Gable, had orchestrated a cover-up of grand proportions. But why would a reputable institution like Arizona Bank and Trust resort to such measures? According to Brandon, the bank believed the funds in his account were accrued fraudulently. However, Brandon vehemently denies these allegations, asserting that the bank used this premise as a smokescreen to divert attention from their own felonious actions. With each passing day, the plot thickened. Brandon found himself not just battling for his hard-earned money, but also fighting to clear his name. This was no longer just about the $30,000, it was about truth, justice, and the trust we place in our financial institutions. So, with $30,000 missing and a mountain of seemingly falsified documents, Brandon turned to the authorities for help. But would the authorities offer the assistance Brandon so desperately needed? Stay tuned to find out what happened next in this riveting saga. What if the very institutions you trust to protect you turned a blind eye? Imagine the frustration of a man named Brandon Bible, who experienced just that. When he discovered that Arizona Bank and Trust had stolen $30,000 from his account, he sought help from the FDIC, the government agency tasked with maintaining public confidence in the financial system. Yet, his complaints fell on deaf ears. His evidence, a mountain of falsified documents and recorded conversations, was overlooked. Brandon didn't stop there. He turned to the Arizona Department of Financial Institutions. He hoped that they, being part of the state's regulatory framework, would take his concerns seriously. But the response was disheartening. Despite multiple attempts to convey the gravity of his situation, he was told, time and again, that they did not handle such matters. The most disconcerting part? After his fourth attempt at reaching out, they suggested he contact a department that had already dismissed his concerns. He complied, only to be met with an attitude and an abrupt hang-up. It was as if he was caught in a loop of indifference and inaction, his pleas for help echoing in an empty chamber. Even when Brandon reached out to the police, the response was lackluster. An initial report was taken only for him to discover later that they were not working on the case. Instead, it was passed off to another department where two detectives raised more questions than answers. Yet, amidst the dismissive attitudes and the lack of response, Brandon's resolve didn't waver. He was a victim of a grave financial crime, and he was determined to fight for his rights, to reclaim what was rightfully his. Each setback was a hurdle to overcome, each ignored complaint a challenge to tackle head-on. Despite the lack of help from these financial institutions, Brandon remained undeterred, determined to reclaim his stolen money. His story serves as a reminder that sometimes, the fight for justice is a lonely one, but it's a fight worth undertaking. It's a testament to the power of persistence in the face of adversity. What would you do if the police seemed more interested in accusing you than helping you? This is the exact predicament Brandon Bible found himself in after his hard-earned $30,000 vanished from his account at Arizona Bank and Trust. Brandon had reached out to the Phoenix Police Department, hoping for some assistance in his plight. An officer took his report and left, giving Brandon a glimmer of hope. However, when he called for a follow-up a few weeks later, he was told that his case had been passed on to the Mesa Police Department, the jurisdiction where the bank was located. A couple of weeks later, two detectives from the Mesa PD showed up at his house unannounced. Brandon was initially relieved, seeing their presence as a sign of progress, but his relief quickly turned to dismay when he asked them about the status of his case. The detectives told him they were still working on it, but during their investigation they had spoken to someone who had painted Brandon as the villain. This person, according to the detectives, was credible and had alleged that Brandon was the one involved in illegal activities. And who was this person? None other than Ken Gable, the vice president of the bank. The very man Brandon had accused of being the mastermind behind the theft of his money. It was clear to Brandon that Ken Gable was trying to divert the police's attention away from him by accusing Brandon of crimes he had not committed. As the detectives began to ask him accusatory questions, Brandon, taken aback, directed them to his attorney. However, the officer ignored his request and continued to question him. This disregard for his rights was not only a violation of the law but also an indication of how the narrative was being twisted against him. The most irritating part was that the questions he was being asked could have been easily answered and completely debunked if the detectives had taken the time to truly investigate his claims. Instead, Brandon was indicted and is awaiting trial for 11 felonies that he did not commit. Left to prove his innocence in a justice system that claims it is the burden of the accuser to prove his guilt. Caught in a frustrating cycle of accusation and denial, Brandon found himself on a lonely journey to justice. When you're up against powerful forces, how do you stand your ground? The answer lies in the story of one man's determination to seek justice, Brandon Bible, who, despite the odds, continues to fight a battle against a banking institution that allegedly stole $30,000 from him, and is attempting to take him from his 3-year-old daughter and put him in prison for crimes he did not commit. His complaints, backed by a mountain of evidence, were met with deaf ears. The police, instead of aiding him, accused him of being the perpetrator, and even with evidence in hand proving his innocence, still charged him with 11 felonies of which he did not commit. But Brandon did not falter. He stood his ground against the very forces that sought to silence him. His narrative, a tale of alleged theft, ignored complaints and police accusations, paints a picture of a man unwilling to back down, a man seeking justice in a world seemingly designed to resist it. In a world where trust is such a valuable commodity, Brandon's story serves as a stark reminder to always question, always seek the truth, and never give up on justice even if it seems to have given up on you.